We are watching record-breaking heat across the lower 48 as we begin the new month of October, and we're also keeping our eye out on the tropics. What's going on with Hurricanes Humberto and Imelda, and is a pattern change in store as we get deeper into the month? Stay tuned for all the details next at the Weather Farm. As we begin our Wednesday, we are watching two hurricanes out in the Atlantic. First, Hurricane Humberto, which was a strong Category 4 over the weekend, has been downgraded to a Category 1 with winds about 85 miles per hour. But right behind it and to the southwest is Hurricane Imelda. This one has strengthened into a Category 1 hurricane on our Tuesday, and as we go into our Wednesday, we're going to watch it as it will impact the island of Bermuda with possibly a direct hit to the island as it continues to move to the east-northeast out into the Atlantic. So taking a look at our satellite image, we see Humberto really get going over the weekend, and here becomes what will form into Imelda. Initially thought to impact the Carolinas with a possible direct hit, but it's actually slowed down and turned out towards sea as it's getting pulled away from the United States by Humberto. Humberto looks less impressive as it moves further north and to the west of Bermuda. It did bring some rain showers, but we do expect Imelda to now make that turn to the east-northeast on our Wednesday. And by the time we get to Wednesday night into early Thursday morning, will impact the island of Bermuda. So let's take a look at Humberto. Again, here's Bermuda. We expect it to be downgraded during the day on our Wednesday into a tropical storm. Winds at the time of this recording are at 80 miles per hour, and it is moving generally to the north at 17 miles per hour, but we'll make that northeasterly and easterly turn over the next 24 hours. But Imelda, at the time of this recording, a Category 1 with winds at 85 miles per hour. It will strengthen into a strong Category 2 by the time we get to Wednesday afternoon, early in the morning on Thursdays, when we do expect it to impact the island of Bermuda with what looks to be a direct hit. Hurricane warnings are in effect for that island. It will continue to move off to the east-northeast. By the time we get to Thursday into early Friday, still a powerful hurricane with winds around 95 to 100 miles per hour. But by Friday afternoon, as it gets into those colder waters in the northern Atlantic, it will start to weaken and become less tropical in nature and become extratropical and be downgraded into a tropical storm. And then we expect it to move well into the North Atlantic, into those much colder waters, and really pose no further threat to inland mass over the upcoming weekend. Coming a little closer back to home, as we begin our Wednesday, we see our two hurricanes off the coast here. There's Imelda, there's Humberto. Those will continue to move away from the United States. We are watching scattered showers across the southern tier, across parts of Florida with that afternoon daytime heating. But we're watching this high as well across Ontario and Quebec. It's going to move down into the northeast, and it's going to provide some stability. Look, a 1034 millibar high, very strong for this time of the year. It's going to provide calming conditions and help to continue to push those hurricanes away from the United States. But out west, we are watching the Pacific Northwest, where we are watching a system move on shore as a trough begins to dig into that part of the country. As that energy moves on shore later in this week, it's going to move into the Rockies, and that's going to set up the possibility for some strong storms across the Rockies and northern plains as we get into the upcoming weekend. And we can tell that our weather is quite calm because right now the Storm Prediction Center doesn't have any area really highlighted for a severe weather threat for our Wednesday. We have thunderstorm threats across the Rockies and northern plains into northern Minnesota. We even have a little bit of a thunderstorm threat here across parts of southeastern Tennessee and northern Georgia, but nothing severe, nothing that we have to be worried about for our Wednesday. Putting our maps into motion, we're going to watch the hurricanes continue to move away from the United States, watch some showers move through Minnesota and onto the shore for the Pacific Northwest as we go into our Thursday. But here's that low pressure that I mentioned, making its way onshore into the Rockies by the time we get to early Friday morning. In terms of our temperatures, it's very warm for this time of the year. 80s all the way up to the Canadian border. 90s are really confined to Texas, Louisiana, and the South, as well as the desert Southwest. We see cooler temperatures across the Pacific Northwest with those showers in the 60s and 70s. But as that high pressure moves out of Quebec into the northeast, temperatures here are going to be cool as well. Temperatures will be in the 50s and 60s. We could even see some upper 40s for afternoon highs across parts of northern Maine. And the repeat pattern continues for our Tuesday with warm temperatures, maybe a few areas touching 100 degrees across far southern Texas, but it's 80s across the Central Plains through the Ohio Valley, warming slightly into the northeast as well as the northwest. So taking a look at the upper level pattern, what's really driving this is we have a strong area of high pressure, a big ridge over the eastern two-thirds of the United States. This is allowing southwesterly winds to go funnel in and provide warm conditions from North Dakota through Texas all the way to the East Coast. We watch this trough digging across the west coast. This trough is going to lift to the northeast over the weekend, and it's going to provide the mechanism for some severe weather from Wyoming through the Dakotas and eventually up into Manitoba as we get to early next week. while we still have southwesterly winds bringing warm conditions to the eastern half of the United States for the first full weekend of October. So jumping ahead to our Friday morning, we're going to watch those storms continue across the south. Again, daily absences of severe weather. We watch that high pressure now move into New York State, really calming the atmosphere here, bringing stable conditions for the upcoming weekend. But out west, there's that low pressure starting to form across Nevada and Utah. And as we get into the weekend, we're going to see that counterclockwise rotation around the low pressure. It's going to bring some southerly winds. We're going to have warm temperatures out across the plains, cooler air diving in behind the front, and that's going to set up the possibility for some strong storms Saturday into Sunday across the northern plains. Out across British Columbia, we're watching those higher elevations receive some snowfall and more rainfall for central British Columbia as we get to our Friday. So putting it all into motion, we're going to watch that low pressure system. And even here in the Rockies, we're going to see those higher elevations start to get in on that snowfall as we wrap some really cold air down into the lower 48. We could see snow levels down to 4,000 or 5,000 feet with a few inches of snow by the time we get to Saturday or Sunday. And as that system continues to move off to the north and east, it's going to intensify. Initially about a 1,000 millibar low, but as it moves up into Manitoba, that low is going to deepen to about a 990, 988 millibar low as it gets to the south of Hudson Bay, bringing rain and snow to that part of Canada. And across the south, we're going to watch for heavy rainfall, especially into Florida, where we're going to see an onshore flow that's going to bring those afternoon storms and heavy amounts of rain across the state of Florida. So our high temperatures pretty much unchanged as we go into our Friday, 80s and 90s, a repeat pattern for our Saturday, but it is on our Sunday that we start to see that contrast in temperatures. Upper 80s across eastern South Dakota, but in western South Dakota, like places like Rapid City, you could be only in the low 60s for your afternoon high. So a contrast in temperature air masses across the northern plains is going to help fuel those storms as we begin our Sunday. And out across the Rockies, especially in those upper elevations, we're going to be down in the 30s and 40s for our afternoon. Out east, it's very warm with those southerly winds out ahead of this low pressure system. 80s and 90s are going to be prevalent across the eastern half of the United States. I mentioned the storms through the Rockies and northern plains and up into Canada, and that's really going to be the main area of precipitation over the next 5 days, with most areas of the country receiving less than a half of an inch of rain over the next 5 days. The exception being across Florida, where you're going to have unstable weather most of the next 5 days, and that's going to lead to locally heavy amounts of rain. Some areas could see 2 to 4, possibly 6 inches of rain across southern Florida by the time we get to our Monday morning. And when we look at our weather outlook for our temperatures for the next 2 weeks, as we get into that second week of October, most of the country, in fact all the country, is highlighted with a greater than normal chance of seeing above normal temperatures during this time period. And in terms of our precipitation, we're going to start to see a monsoon flow coming up from the southwest through Arizona and New Mexico, bringing above normal chances of precipitation here. That's going to extend all the way up into the central plains, especially as we get these warm air masses to the east and cooler air masses to the west. That's going to set up those boundary zones of strong storms across the northern plain into the central plain, bringing heavier amounts of rain possible to that area. Across Florida, you're still going to be influenced by those warmer tropical air masses. We would expect above normal precipitation across that part for the second week of October, but it's the east half of the United States that remains abnormally dry. And we're going to wait and see what the drought monitor has for the United States. That will be issued on Thursday morning, but we would expect drought conditions continuing across the eastern half of the United States. And when we look at the month of October, we're really expected to see above normal temperatures for most of the United States. As we get into the second half of the month, though, there are hints that we could see cold air masses being dislodged into the lower 48, really impacting the northern plains into the Great Lakes as we get into the middle of the month towards the end of the month. We're going to watch this to see how this all plays out, but there is an equal chance of near normal temperatures across the central and northern plains for the month of October. And the reason we think that is as we get into next week, we're going to watch a trough dig into the northeast, bring an initial shot of cooler weather to that area as we get to the middle of next week. But then we have the southwesterly winds out ahead of it. But as we get into the second weekend of October, an even more powerful, potent air mass is going to dive in from Canada, and that's going to bring cooler than normal conditions across most of the eastern thirds of the United States as we get towards that second weekend of October. Still about 10 days away. A lot can change with this particular forecast, but there are signs that as we get to the second week, somewhere around the 10th through the 14th of the month, we could see a pattern change across the lower 48 of the United States. And in fact, we look here, here's one model where it has widespread temperatures 10, 15, 20 degrees below seasonal norm for a good chunk of the United States. and we see where that air is originating across the Canadian provinces, where we're starting to see snow in those far northern climates. And that's going to be key as we go into the middle parts of October. How quickly does the snowpack form across Alaska, the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and how quickly does it build towards the south by the time we get to November and into early December? What happens to the north is really going to impact our weather here across the lower 48 as we get into the later months of this year. So a lot to monitor and keep our eyes on, and we will always bring you the latest here at the Weather Farm. Well, we hope you have a wonderful Wednesday. Go ahead and drop a comment and let us know where you're watching this video from. What kind of weather are you seeing in your particular neighborhood? Is there something you would like to know more about that we talked about today? Go ahead and let us know those comments, and we will see you again next in our next video. Have a great day.